I'm Swati Daftawar and I'm from The Hindu. The Dialogue Beyond the Bookshelf is an attempt by the Hindu Literary Festival and Bahari Sons, obviously, and Co-Local, this wonderful space, to create another kind of property that enables conversations and enables deeper, wider conversations around books, around literature, around publishing. This is our second episode or our second event, and we are so grateful to Monica Halan for coming here and for having this conversation with us. So Monica, welcome.
Thank you so much. And thank you. You've all made it on a Sunday out of your homes. There's stuff going on. I know my house is getting painted, so I literally the house was grabbing at me as I left.
Yeah. Yeah. Sundays, it's lovely to have, and also Sunday seems like a really nice time to have it. It's relaxed. We want this conversation to be interactive. And I think it's time to begin. So thank you once again for joining us. And Monica, my first question to you. My first question to you is actually about your own legacy as a writer. So, because your latest book, Let's Talk Legacy, it's kind of the third part of what seems to be a series. But I want to know if it was planned as a series. I want to know how your journey as a writer started and how you went from what you wanted to discuss in your first book to what you maybe left out and discussed in Let's Talk Mutual Funds. And then you kind of moved on to legacy. So I want to kind of get an idea of how your writing legacy has been and what the journey has been.
So thank you again once more. So Let's Talk Money has now 6 years later sold more than 1 lakh copies.
Yeah.
And I just want to share that I had no idea that it was going to touch the hearts of people. So I've written a book on money, but somewhere I think it has touched the hearts, which for me is a big, big, big win, because people reach me from everywhere with their stories, with their personal stories.
Yeah.
So for an author who's writing on something as dry and mechanical as money to actually reach people's hearts, for me it's a big high.
Yeah.
I feel I've done something. I've managed to reach the audience with the idea that it's not just money, it's everything else around it.
Yeah.
It is the emotions, it is the insecurities, it's the fear, it's the greed, it's the power play in the household, it's all of that.
Yeah.
So Let's Talk Money was really a culmination of the work that I was doing as a personal finance journalist for 15 years,
right,
where I felt that my outreach in terms of television shows, newspaper articles, interviews was not enough. People wanted something in a more structured manner.
Yeah.
So Let's Talk Money is sort of the next logical step to take those years of work into a basic onboarding. And as a journalist, I realized that people were going directly to products. Okay, so you're going and you're jumping in shark-infested waters. You don't know how to swim.
Yeah.
Okay, you are not even going to a deep end of the pool. You're going into, because I know finance, I know the markets, I know the regulators. It is shark-infested waters. They're after your money. You have to be careful. You have to be very diligent about how you're going to buy the product. So products for me come at the end of a process, not at the beginning. My idea was to give a ramp, to give a mental ramp to people to reach this place where you can start choosing products.
Right.
Okay, so you don't start with choosing products, you start with prep. Yeah. And the preparatory work is all of this, the cash flow planning, the emergency fund, the insurances, what kind of insurances. So the way that I think about it in my head is that I'm going to commit my money to long-term investing, right, through a risk product, through the stock market. For retail, it's mutual funds. But I need to secure my today first. I secure my today with a cash flow system, emergency fund, insurances. So I'm strapping my today down. See, for me, today is more important than tomorrow. Any rational human being, my today has to be more important than tomorrow. So can I secure my today before I think about tomorrow? Yeah. So everything about tomorrow will be at step 3 or 4.
Yeah.
That was simply the logic of Let's Talk Money, that you've been sold wrong. You've been sold through greed, through fear, through all those things.
Yeah.
but it is about stability. It's about having confidence. And you know, if you're just doing fixed deposits or gold or land, whatever it is you are doing, if you understand it, it is fine.
Right.
Don't get fearful that मैंने ये नहीं किया, वो नहीं किया. Don't get. So the idea is that you're probably doing okay with what you know. There is a way to upgrade, but we will upgrade very slowly.
Right.
So it's that really was the intention behind Let's Talk Money, to handhold somebody into taking risk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mutual funds tells you, and then mutual funds happened. I mean, look, after COVID, the industry exploded. I've been part of the journey from the beginning. So I've seen the progression of the SIP from something you drink to a product happen. Okay, so
Right.
it's been a whole journey.
Yeah.
And then I would get asked parties, mein, you know, 5 fund bata do. I can't tell you. I don't know who you are. I don't know your life. I don't know what assets you have. I don't know your risk. I can't give you 5 kinds of aspirin.
Yeah.
I can't do that.
Yeah.
So the idea about mutual funds was, look, this is the best product for retail investors.
Yeah.
But you need to onboard the train, knowing where it is going, knowing what you want to do with it. There are over 2,000 schemes.
Yeah.
Which one are you picking? You can't pick last year's winner. So the idea was also to tell the readers, look, there's a whole lot of regulatory and policy thought which I've been a part of, which has gone into this industry. We've tried to secure it. There's a logic why I believe that this is the product, this is the route which has different products, which is very suitable to retail investors, but you need to do a lot of work. So anyone who's read mutual funds will tell you that I stopped short, and I've been accused कि आप तो company का नाम ही नहीं लेते हो. I can't do that because what I've written this last year.
Yeah.
Who knows what happens to the company in 3 years? I can't recommend products. So what I've done is I've taught you to fish. I'm not giving you the fish. I'm not giving you 5 names. I'm saying this is the route.
Yeah.
You follow it, you personalize it, then you don't need me after that.
Right.
So I'm trying to make myself, I'm taking myself out of the picture and saying you don't need to keep coming back to me.
Correct.
You do it yourself. Legacy has come out of the idea that we don't document. So it's actually a book where you document your financial life. It's not what you read. It's like what Sachin said, it's not for your bookshelf, it's for your locker.
Yeah.
We don't document. So it's an idea that you start documenting your financial life, because it's not that it is something that your heirs will need. You need this today.
Right.
I have 50 username and passwords. Yeah, what do I remember? So you record it and you lock it.
Right.
So that's the idea of the 3 books. I don't know where this journey goes, but that's been sort of my mental progression, that you've got all these assets.
Yeah.
Please document.
Right. You know, I think one of the things that you talk about right now is that idea of you teach someone to fish and they don't have to keep returning to you. I think the thing that I want to know from you is this idea of how, even while you're writing the book, things are changing in terms of how generation to generation looks and deals with their money, how much we earn, what we can do with the money that we have today. So, for example, a lot of the younger crowd today talks about how it's almost impossible to buy a house, or it's almost impossible to buy a car. There are certain checklists that once upon a time India used to have, aspirational India used to have. You reach a certain point in time and then you buy a car, and then you buy a house, and then you kind of have fixed deposits, etc. You basically reach a stability in your life. How has that changed today in maybe something as simple as the gig economy, where a lot of people are kind of moving from job to job quicker than once upon a time used to? Things are changing very rapidly from generation to generation. Within generations, there are gaps in how we are handling money. So when you write a book like this, when you're teaching, like you said, people to fish, how has your own understanding over time changed from, say, when Let's Talk Money came out to now when Let's Talk Legacy comes out?
So there are some basics in finance which don't change.
Right.
Absolutely. They are like cast in stone of knowing what you invest in. Fear, greed are not good emotions to have, all of that. And you said that houses are out of reach. My starting salary 32 years back was 1650. 1,650. The houses used to be in lakhs, couldn't afford it.
So you're saying the gap has remained the same.
It's always the same.
Right.
The house is
Interesting.
always, no matter what your generation is, that house is going to be out of reach.
Interesting. Okay.
So the basic characteristic of money doesn't change. The only thing is that this generation, so the difference is that I'm part of what I call a poverty mindset. I grew up in the 70s. We were a
Right.
socialist country. To the young people, you have no idea how bad lived socialism is. Don't believe people who are saying socialism is good, or it is not. Okay? Growth plus redistribution is the model.
Right.
So our entire emotion and action was defined by lack of opportunity, lack of money, lack of things, lack of service. We are now in an abundance economy. The shift that I see is this generation, post 2000. Remember, reforms happened in 91.
Yeah. Yeah.
This was like this door which opened. So political freedom 47, economic freedom 91.
Yeah.
People born after the year 2000 are born into an abundance mindset.
Hmm.
And it is such a great thing. Like, it is fantastic. So there are problems with spending too much, but they are not constrained by us, our poverty mindset, who wouldn't take risk, who wouldn't go on the front foot. We were afraid that this, like, one job was your lifeline. If you
Yeah.
lost that, you went back into genteel poverty. Okay, you
Right.
just had no option. There was nothing. These people take far more risk. These people, it's a lot about here and now. So that's the shift that I see, and I'm actually happy about this shift. So my communication, even through the books, is that today is important. You will never be 20 and 30 again.
Yeah.
Okay, so please don't just live for tomorrow, live today, but have a little bit of an eye for tomorrow as well.
Right.
Because the other thing that I get from this generation is that they feel that climate change will destroy the earth.
So they're not looking at the future as a
And my communication, again, through this, whatever talks and books that I do, is to say that the human species has survived
many other
wars,
things.
plagues.
Yeah.
What has it survived? What have we survived as a species?
Yeah.
We will survive. What happens to you at 60 with no assets? Your parents will leave it to you. Our generation we've just ground down and worked.
Yeah.
We have created the assets. You will inherit.
Yeah.
Sure. But what about your own assets? So you have to think of a time when you're 60, 65 and your life is another 30 years.
Right.
So it's this whole communication about this today and tomorrow with this generation. To
Right.
say, today is important.
Yeah.
But remember, tomorrow is also going to come.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just the thing.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, you mentioned ages, and that makes me think about one of the questions that I had for you, and also that we have for ourselves a lot, is when is the right time to start thinking about your finances? Is it when you start working, or is there ever a time when it might be too late to play catch up with your finances? Like the idea that you didn't start early enough, you didn't start saving, say, in the first 5 years, 10 years of working, you kind of let things, you know, you're living salary to salary, you're living rent to rent, and then you start maybe towards your 40s, you start towards your late 30s. Is there a time that is the ideal time to start planning your finances, or you can start anytime and you can play catch up?
There's always a consequence to your decisions.
Yeah.
So again, my whole idea is to say that everyone's an adult. These are choices we have. Choices have consequences.
Yeah.
Who am I to tell you what to do? I can just tell you what the possible consequence can be.
Right.
So the first thing is, you can start from your first paycheck. But your first paycheck is usually not too much, and there are a lot of expenses.
Yeah.
It's not a bad idea for the first couple of years to just develop a habit of saving.
Right.
Which is, can you do $1,000? Can you do $2,000? I'm not saying 10% of your income. I'm not even going there. I'm saying, can you develop this habit of saving?
Right.
By the time you're in your mid-30s, can you then bump it up? And you must remember that your 50s is going to be your highest earning decade, and you will get there.
Yeah.
Okay, and that is the decade you are at the peak of your career. your income is at its highest.
Right.
That is the time you can possibly save 40 to 50% of your income.
Hmm.
So if you have this path
Hmm.
of your life, you can then choose to save a little less today,
Right.
because you know that as your increments come, as your progress in your career, you will earn more and more. So you have this idea that I promise to save more tomorrow,
Hmm.
but I will start my habit today.
Right.
It is too late by the time you're in your mid-50s. If you've got no assets, and I find it difficult to believe people do build assets.
Yeah.
Because you see, we are human capital, we are labor, right? We get old, we get tired, we get diseased.
Yeah.
There is technology comes and takes away work. So even should you want to work, there mayn't be paying work.
Right.
So you have to actually prep. So the whole game is of 30 years.
Yeah.
पूरी कहानी ये 30 साल की है. So first 25 years you sort of prep for this. This is your playground now.
Right.
In this playground you will live today and you will plan for the next 40 years.
Right.
How do you want to do this is entirely up to you.
Okay.
Okay, so you can back end it a bit, but it's good idea to start the habit as soon as you start earning.
As soon as you start.
Which is why Let's Talk Money will tell you how to just set up the system,
Yeah.
so that you can just say start by $1,000.
Right.
Then it's up to you. You want to bump it up, you should. Every time you get an increment, save a part of that. Every time there's a lump sum, save 60% of that. So it basically gives you a system to do that.
Right.
But the decision is yours, and that decision will have consequences.
Right. Okay, so I think I have a couple of questions, and I think I'm going to maybe put those out, and then maybe we'll see if audience has questions. But the first one is to do with, I think, what we were discussing right before the conversation started, which is India is a queer place when it comes to certain kinds of conversations, right? Like the conversations around sex and the conversation around money. There are certain subjects, the conversation around debt, all of those things. And Monica and I talking about how she was saying how death is something that plays a lot into how we think about it. Like we don't talk about it, we don't put it out there just in case it affects us. Which affects, like you said, you talked about legacy, the idea of what you leave behind, what assets have you created. How could you talk a little bit about how that this aspect of India affects how we look at money, how we look at inheritance, how we look at wills, legacy, all of those things?
So there is, as people get older, they get concerned about their care.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know how else to put it, but there'll always be one set of kids who will do more than the others, and then the question is equal fair? Okay, inheritance is equal fair. Okay, these are very difficult. They are bombs in households.
Yeah.
So the old people fear, and it's a real fear, because so I have my father's 88, he lives with me. My mother-in-law's 85, she lives with me. And I can see them slowly get more and more concerned about, they cannot manage things on their own.
Yeah.
So for them, their fear is, what happens to me? So for such people, it's a great idea to write their wills without telling the children.
Yeah.
It is entirely possible to get a lawyer, to get a chartered accountant, a planner, a close family friend to draft their will.
Yeah.
Where at least they put out what they want to do, seal it, let not the children look at it, and leave it.
Right.
They should not transfer their assets while they're alive. There are enough bad stories.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm in the middle. I have a child and I have old parents. So I see it from all points of view. Okay. So for them, somehow they need to be told that you can do this without upsetting what is happening today.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So therefore, they hesitate to put out their wishes clearly.
Yeah.
So, which is somewhere, Let's Talk Legacy is telling people to record it. So at least there is a trail. And encourage them to write a will, which again I've said, you don't need to show it to anybody. You can just seal it.
Yeah.
So at least your wishes are known.
Right.
So I think there are a whole lot of, and look, there is this whole thing of a big happy family. As you grow old, it's not like that. Okay,
Yeah.
there are sibling problems. There are, once you get married, there are problems of the siblings getting along, of power equations within the family, of the extended family. Okay, it's a mess. Which is why nobody wants to open this box.
Yeah.
Because the minute the asset division starts, there is going to be a lot of problem within the house. So whoever shouts more gets more. Unfortunately, that's how it happens. The only way is for people who are writing a will to not tell their children what to. I can give it to an ashram.
Yeah.
You fight, I will, but you won't know it till I die.
Right.
Okay, those are entirely my wishes. These are my assets. I've created them. I will decide what happens to them. So these are very difficult conversations.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping somewhere Legacy initiates the conversation to say, can you just record it?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it. I'm not asking. Don't leave anything to me. Can you just record it?
Right. Yeah.
So,
it's, like you talk about, I mean, difficult conversations. Money is such a difficult conversation, right from as a child. Also, one of the things that happens in Indian households that kids are not talked to about money. We don't share finances with kids. We don't tell them if there's an issue with money in the
poverty
house.
mindset.
Exactly. So
we need to change it. This is a new generation. They have abundance.
Yeah.
We need to change this mindset.
So then are we talking about money being one of the symptoms of what is for example, do you think today also how we talk to children about money, or how, like you said, older people talk about money, the fear that they have around talking about money and death and all of those things, what are the what are the things at the root that need to kind of change in the way we think as India? The aspirations are there. The need to want to become more than you are is there. But to talk about it openly and to kind of discuss it and think about it in a much deeper way, that's not there. So do you think there are certain things that are ingrained that we've learned that is preventing us from kind of doing that?
Yeah. So we've actually, because of this generations of poverty, which we've all lived through because of the conquests and the colonization, so poverty became a moral high ground because there was no way you could get rich. So the rich you could only become rich through being corrupt and evil and smuggler and all of that. That relationship of the rich being evil has to be broken.
Right.
Okay, so if an industrialist builds a large house and has a lavish wedding, why should I comment?
Interesting, yeah.
Has he paid taxes on it? Yes. Is it illegal money? Let the government go after him.
Yeah.
Why should me in my middle class 2 BHK have a view which is so toxic on somebody who's built a large house and has spent a lot on his children's weddings?
Right.
Just for matter of statistic, he may have spent 0.01% of his wealth, and a middle class 2 BHK person will spend 20% of the net worth. Who spent more?
Right.
So this relationship of being rich and evil has to be broken.
Right.
Money, the day that we realize that money is good, and remember, these are socialist roots which we have to cut.
Yeah, that's what I mean by root.
It has to be cut. Money is good. It is how you earn it and how you spend it.
Right.
I can have moral judgments on that. Am I growing marijuana? That's illegal, right? But it gets me money. How do I earn my money? And what am I spending it on?
Right.
I'm spending it on to put toxic stuff into my body, to be a boor in a coffee shop, it reflects the way that you spend your money also reflects on who you are. So that has to be established, that money is what you do with it. How do you want to earn it? It's a reflection on the rest of your life.
Right.
What you want to do? How do you want to earn this? How do you want to spend it? Also reflects on your own life, who you are, what you will be.
Yeah.
Money itself is good. It's a force. It's a very, very strong force. And because we have kicked it away, it sits with, there's no other way of saying it, largely the asuras.
Right.
Okay. So if the devas want it back, you have to say, please come, money is good. Let's talk about it.
Right. Okay, so I think a final question I have for you is about, so there are ways to kind of write books like these. There's that sort of the thing with discussing money and finances and something like you mentioned the word SIP, right? Now I would say that for a very long time in my 20s, I wouldn't have known the full form of SIPs. I wouldn't have actually tried to even look it up. I wouldn't have tried to understand how the share market works, or how mutual funds work. There are all of these concepts are kind of it's almost the repository of people who work with those big numbers and big charts and all those things. How do you kind of in your books, and that's something you do so wonderfully well, that you break down concepts in a way that someone who might have never thought of arranging their finances in a way, maybe the maximum they would have thought of is hiring someone to do it for them, hiring a financial planner or a CA or what are those things. To be able to do it yourself, you have to really understand these concepts deeply. So I want to know a little bit about how do you kind of write books in a way, and what is the mindset and what is the planning behind it that goes into writing something like Let's Talk Money or Let's Talk Legacy? How do you talk to the people who probably, like so many of us, might not have even tried to understand how the world of finance works?
Right. I think it just comes from this idea that finance actually is not tough. It's been made tough.
Yeah.
And it can be understood. You're a lawyer, you're a doctor, you're a scientist. You've done very complicated things in your life. This is not difficult.
Right.
So that's the core is this, that I know this. So I have a master's in economics and all of that, but finance I learned on the job.
Right.
While being a journalist, I learned finance. I think just a way of saying that, to make it simple but not simplistic.
Right.
To communicate this, knowing that you're not stupid. Okay, so a lot of finance writers begin from here.
Yeah.
I'm a suit. You guys are stupid. I'm starting from here. I'm saying it is not difficult. You're not stupid. You run very complicated lives. The market is difficult. It's a bad regulatory structure. It is a policy failure in India, the kind of market that we have. In this, you're negotiating and you're doing okay. There's a way to do better. I think it's just this. I'm trying to reach people where they are to say, the problem is complicated. You are not stupid. And I deeply believe that. I think that reflects in the book, and that's what people, I think, connect with. I understand. Yeah. It is difficult.
Yeah. That is true. I mean, I think one of the things is your book, especially Let's Talk Money, I think one of the things it did was gave people a way to understand, like you could use it as a guidebook. So that I think was it was wonderfully designed also, so that you weren't just reading it, you were using it. It was a book you could use.
Yeah, so people come with me with the book all flagged with things. And
Okay, so I think I've got a couple of questions for you before we end. And this is a larger understanding of, so we've talked about very specific areas now, but what I want to know from you is, because a lot of people here, when they asked you a question, they began with how much they trust what you've written and the credibility behind the information you're giving them. I think today, one of the things that happened due to social media, due to people becoming experts in a specific field because they might have been successful every successful investor is not probably the best advisor. Correct. So I want to know from you, how does a reader or how does a viewer audience distinguish between, so right in the beginning you talked about how people came up to you and said, give me 5 mutual funds to invest in, and you wouldn't, because you talked about how things change year to year and you can't invest in what worked for you is not necessarily going to work for someone else. But this is exactly the kind of information we have out there today. Like there are fin influencers, people who have kind of made a career out of telling you exactly where to invest, how much to invest, how to plan your exact. So instead of giving the control, they have the control and you have to keep going back to them to get more advice. So how much information are you seeing around this particular area, which is financial planning and investment, etc., which is, if not misinformation, then harmful to in the long run or harmful to the people who are viewing it? And how does a reader kind of distinguish between what is credible information and what is information that they should take with a pinch of salt?
Yeah, so anyone who's doing a product push.
Okay.
So in fact, Anshika, who works with me, she was asking me that, do you have a sponsor for your podcast? I said it's difficult because I'll never push a product. Like
Right.
in my podcast, I won't say, you know what, I'm using XYZ credit card and it's great. I will never do that.
Right.
So you have to distinguish a product push which is embedded into the editorial of the information coming at you.
Yeah.
I'm using this trading app
Yeah.
and it's great.
Yeah.
I would be very suspicious.
Right.
Because that's an advertising. It's surrogate, it's advertising.
Hmm.
It's ads coming as content.
Right.
So that's a red flag.
Yeah.
Second is somebody who's promising you this untold wealth
Hmm.
overnight. Look, I built this house. Look,
Yeah.
I got this car.
Yeah.
If you got so rich, why are you wasting your time doing videos?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah. No, it's completely understandable.
Yeah. And then, so every time I want to listen to you, then I have to pay money
Hmm.
to buy the. Why am I buying the course? So that I can
Yeah.
do the trading that you are doing.
Yeah.
So I can do the F&O strategies that you are doing.
Yeah.
So be careful of somebody who's pressing the buttons of greed
Right.
and FOMO.
Yeah.
That everyone's making money, you are not.
Yes. Yeah.
So I would just say you have to be very mature with your money. If you want thrills, go somewhere. Go for a trek. Go for a whatever
Yeah.
else which gives you a thrill.
Yeah.
Money has to be boring.
Yeah.
It has to be predictable.
Hmm.
It should work in the background so you can do the things that you like.
Yeah.
If you get your thrill from money, then out of 100 rupees, take 5 rupees and get your thrills with 5.
Right.
Okay? Whether it's 1 lakh, 100, whatever.
Hmm.
Don't go for thrills with all of your money.
Hmm.
So some people in their retirement are addicted to day trading.
Yeah.
I understand there's nothing else to do.
Yeah.
Just take 5 rupees out of 100 and then do that. Don't put more at risk.
Right. Yeah.
So those are the kind of things that you need to be careful about. What is this person telling me really?
Hmm. Hmm.
Understand the story behind.
Right. Yeah. So, okay. So, a final question would be, so this book, we talked about, like you talked about how at the age of say 50 or so, you are at the peak of your earning capacity as that's your salary, that's the peak that you'll be, and when you get your first paycheck. But we've been talking so much about people who work paycheck to paycheck, people who are
Yeah.
salaried individuals. And today a lot of people are moving towards, one of the things is of course gig economy, but also there's startups, there's people who are starting businesses, who are maybe the first, who are going into business for the first time, they don't have the assets of. So would a book like Let's Talk Money or a book like Let's Talk Legacy, is it also for people who are right now maybe not earning paycheck to paycheck, so there is no saving so much as investment going into businesses, or is that a completely different subject, is that a completely different approach to money?
So there will be some similarities in terms of so this is obviously designed for a person who's getting a paycheck every month.
Yeah.
But there are some, so again, there is a book to be written only for the gig worker.
Yeah.
Because what they have is unequal flows of
Exactly.
income.
Yeah.
So they'll get a large amount in 1 month.
Hmm.
But what you can do is use the system in the same way.
Right.
So you can build your emergency fund.
Hmm.
You can have a
Yeah.
sum of money and you transfer only the amount you spend every month
Right.
into your spend it account.
Hmm.
The rest of the money you are hoarding in your income account.
Hmm.
So you can use the system for yourself
Right.
so that it works for your unequal income flows.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing that is a larger subject to tackle.
Because you, as a gig worker, as a startup, you also have to understand that the income is going to be some years in the future.
Exactly. Yeah.
So who's going to fund you in that time?
Hmm.
Is it going to be your parents? Is it your partner?
Right.
Do you have about a plan at least for 2 years?
Yeah.
If there's a medical emergency, do you have a medical insurance at least?
Right.
You
Yeah.
must have that.
Yeah.
Is there a plan B?
Yeah.
So those are the questions that a startup person should think of.
Yeah.
And we know that 9 out of 10 startups do fail. Which
Exactly.
is not to say don't take the risk, because it's great that you take the risk,
Hmm.
but protect your years of the startup
Yeah.
with some help, whether it's parental or partner
Yeah.
or inheritance,
Yeah.
whatever.
Got it.
Yeah.
So I think we're at the end of our conversation.